if we perfect. Welcome everybody. I said this earlier, I'll do another quick intro. My name is Dawn Andreas. I'm the head of community here at Bristle. I am joined by our CEO, Danny Granick, and one of our oral health coaches, Heather Kinney, who are joining us tonight for this community chat, really an exploration into the oral microbiome, and into really your personal, decoding your personal oral microbiome. So many of you on the call, I'm sure, have done testing with us. Many of you may not have done testing. Either way, you're in the right place. We're going to go into a little bit of background on the oral microbiome in general, how it's connected to our overall health. And Danny will give you a little insight as to, why and how Bristle got started as well. We won't spend too much time there. We don't want to bore you with the details about us. This is really your time. And then we're going to transition to Heather, and she's going to do a phenomenal walkthrough behind the scenes of what a live test report looks like. It is actual, and it is a real test results from one of our team members. We'll get to that in a second, and what our care plans look like as well. But really what we wanted to do was bring Heather to the forefront to kind of have you meet an oral health coach, show the behind the scenes of how our clients and Bristle test takers work with our oral health coaches. And what does all that mean? Because many of us are not used to getting coached by our doctors or by medical professionals. So with that, settle in. We're saving time at the end for questions, and it'll be a little bit of a party as we dig in. So hopefully we'll make some of the science fun and you guys will get your questions answered. If you have, Denise, I do see that. Is there closed captioning? I'm not sure if we can turn that on or not. We'll see if we can work some magic in the background. If not, when we will be sending out the recording, and I'll see what I can do as well for that. Thank you for asking for that. Okay, so Danny, we're gonna start with you. This is Danny Granick, everyone. He's our CEO and one of the co-founders of Bristle Health. And do you want to just give a little bit of your background, introduction, anything about you, long walks on the beach, your dog? I'm kidding. And a little welcome everyone around, and then we'll get into some oral microbiome stuff.
Yeah, I'm happy to. First of all, I hope everybody is having a great, what is it, Tuesday night. I recognize a lot of the names here. I think I've actually connected with quite a few of you over the last couple of weeks, just learning more about your experience with oral health and with Bristle. So really excited to have you join. Let's see, my background. So my background was originally, and I'm just admitting people on the side here, but my background was originally in biochemistry. Did a lot of research in undergrad, particularly in developing ways to deliver targeted therapeutics. And pretty quickly realized that I didn't want to spend the next 8 to 10 years in a lab doing research. So that led me to the field of genomics and DNA sequencing on the commercial side. And I ended up working across a lot of different companies that were, in the very beginning of implementing this relatively new technology that allowed us to analyze and uncode the genome, right? And that can be the human genome, it can be animal genomes or plant genomes, across all of the different areas of health. You can imagine gut microbiome research, oncology research, so on and so forth. And after spending a few years in there, I was really trying to identify new areas in health that could be impacted by new technologies. That led me to really focus on dental care, which I didn't imagine I would end up in, but I'm really happy I'm here now. I get to work with amazing people. And yeah, formed the original team and launched Bristle. So what I think we'll do is maybe talk about kind of the mission behind Bristle, and not my personal reasons for starting the company, but really I think why the company exists. So
yeah, that's perfect. And any background I know you're ready to give us on the oral microbiome, would love to, orient people there and then have Heather dig in.
Definitely. And if there are questions as we go through the slides, I'm going to present a couple slides in typical CEO fashion, but if there's questions, feel free to add them to the chat, and we'll try to get to them.
Yeah, I'll grab them.
So let's see. Awesome. So let's expand this. Can everybody see this very plain looking slide? Okay, perfect. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the company whose webinar you're joining, the company is called Bristle Health. We do saliva testing and we look at the oral microbiome, and I'll get into what that means in a second. But at our core, we're really a company around oral health, and not a lot of people are aware of this, but oral diseases are actually the most prevalent conditions on the planet, even though they are largely preventable when you catch them early. These are percentages, but what these equate to are tens to hundreds of millions of people that suffer from cavities, gum disease, and millions more suffering from overlooked and chronic conditions like oral thrush, biofilm buildup, and halitosis, which is chronic bad breath. And, we have to step back and ask ourselves, how did we end up here? Why are these largely preventable conditions so unbelievably common across the world? And, while dental care is evolving, a lot of it is still reactive, and it's really limited by the technologies that we use in the clinic. So, I know a lot of the people on this call are patients. I imagine that there's a lot of hygienists and dentists as well. And I think we can all agree on some of the themes that we're talking about here. Only 65% of US adults see a dentist every year, even though, we all know that we should be getting in every 6 months for our checkup. The three reasons behind it are cost, anxiety, and inconvenience. It's just too much time for us to get there. When we do go to the dental clinic, we have people look inside of our mouths. They use tools like x-rays, and these tools really just focus on detecting the symptoms of disease. If you imagine an x-ray, it's looking for tooth decay, right? At a point where it's really hard to prevent if you already have disease. And that means that if somebody does detect a cavity, the first line treatment is an expensive or invasive or painful procedure like a cavity filling, which I've had tons of. And it makes it really hard for us as patients and dentists as health providers to work on managing and proactively improving our oral health. So Bristle is focused on a slightly different technology. We look at something called the oral microbiome, and I'm sure that a lot of people here are familiar with the term microbiome, but for those of you who aren't, the microbiome is this very broad term that basically means a community of bacteria, fungi, and viruses, and there's some other kinds of microbes that are mixed in there as well. The oral microbiome specifically is that community that lives inside of our mouths, and there are over 700 different bacterial species alone that are associated with the oral microbiome. Some of these microbes can be beneficial and they contribute to good oral health. They help us prevent disease, and other microbes are harmful or what we call pathogenic, and they contribute to poor oral health and the onset of disease. The oral microbiome, kind of a fun fact, it was actually the oral microbiome that was first observed when bacteria were first characterized by this very, very old person hundreds of years ago. I'm going to butcher the name, but I think it was Antoine van Leeuwenhoek, first observed microbiota or microbes under a microscope from a scraping that he took off of one of his teeth. And that's what we see in this top right corner, where he describes first seeing those little critters kind of squiggling across his microscope. So we have the oral microbiome. What influences health and disease? Too many or too much of these harmful or pathogenic microbes, be it bacteria, fungi, or viruses, ultimately lead to disease. When we have an imbalance in our mouths, those harmful bacteria can take over and they can cause various oral diseases like cavities and gum disease. And we have two examples here. So on the left, you can see that an overabundance of cavities causing bacteria can convert sugar into acid, and eventually the acid builds up and causes decay in our enamel and eventually forms what we recognize as a cavity. On the other hand, we have an overabundance of other kinds of bacteria that cause an inflammatory response. And these kinds of bacteria over time can lead to gum disease and other conditions like halitosis. Why is oral health so important? Besides, having fresh breath or having a clean mouth, oral health is a really, really important component of overall health. The same bacteria that influence oral disease or contribute to oral health also work in other parts of our bodies to do the same thing. So we have a saying at Bristle, good health starts with a healthy mouth. We believe that taking this proactive, preventive, and personalized approach to oral care will help people take a really significant step in improving their overall health. And I promised Dawn that I would keep it really short, so I'm going to end it there. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think, ultimately, this is still all emerging, and we've spent 10 years or a decade, most of us, hearing about the gut microbiome. And I think we're really starting to understand it's not just the gut microbiome that's important. And for those of you on the call, particularly those of you that have gut microbiome issues, I'm sure Heather will touch on this. Often we see co-occurrences with oral conditions and gut conditions as well. So again, that systemic influence to your overall health is real. And again, as Danny said, any questions that come up for you, please just drop them in the chat. I'll try to grab them, or Danny will, and we'll definitely make sure we have time for a Q&A this evening as well. But Heather, thank you for being here. I know you spend a lot of your time behind the scenes, helping our clients, our patients, if you will, and would love for you to just, give us a little bit of your background before you came to Bristle. I know you spent a lot of time in clinic, but tell everyone kind of what you were doing and what your background is and your knowledge base.
So I am a dental hygienist. I've been practicing for a little over 20 years in clinical practice. I've worked in all different aspects of dentistry. So from, private practice that are smaller, starting out the hygiene departments, working for a DSO where, we did, more corporate type of settings as a, the director of hygiene for that program, directing the hygiene program, and having the hygienist and supporting them in their diagnosis processes and things like that. And then I ended up moving to a biologic dental practice, a functional, holistic type of practice. And I did that because I was just frustrated with the cycle of disease and not helping patients after years and years of doing the same thing over and over and just not feeling like I was being successful, and having the passion for wanting to truly help my patients. So I lucked out, found an amazing office that when I started there, I was like, hey, are you doing microscopes? Are you using guided biofilm therapy? Are you using lasers? And they weren't at the time, but they were on board with implementing those types of things. So I started being really interested in the oral microbiome through listening to podcasts like the Biofilm Factor, and them just talking about different ways that we could shift and support the oral microbiome through probiotics and other means than just being a tooth scraper and slapping some fluoride or chlorhexidine on the problem and calling it a day. So I was fortunate enough for the last 3 years to be working in an office where I was chairside with a microscope. So I took microscope slides with all of my patients, which was super fun. And I'm going to try to share a little bit of a slide in a minute to just show you, how cool that was. But the slide showed me a number of different things, some inflammatory cascades, because I could see white blood cells and red blood cells. So understanding the inflammatory process within the patient with the bacteria present, or whether there's no bacteria that I could, isolate. So guided biofilm therapy is a process where we use an air polishing machine and we disclose our patients. That was super eye-opening too, because for those patients who are like, I don't have any plaque, you know, there's a lot of plaque in the mouth that you can't see physically. And the use of the disclosing solution changed the way I practiced dentistry completely. And it changed the way I educated my patients. So disclosing solution is something you can paint on the teeth. It shows me where the sticky biofilm based bacteria is. And I'll kind of explain that when I share a little bit of the slide, because there's different niches of bacteria that live within the oral microbiome. There's the sticky fuzzy socks, the chained rods, the chained cocci, and we have this kind of in our platform so that people can understand. But then we also have bacteria that are free floating and swimming in the nooks and crannies and within the pocket, even though you might not have a pocket, or maybe in the crevices of the tongue, especially if you have fissured tongue. And then tonsils, those are a biologic, invaginated area where all kinds of bacteria can thrive and swim around. So the problem with using the microscope is I didn't know what the heck I was looking at. It was like, all right, I know that, T. denticola is a spirochete. I know that Fusobacterium is a rod, but I have no idea, aside from learning about Candida albicans and the correlation with Candida albicans and what I was finding in my patients with gum line cavity. If I had lots of Candida albicans on my slides, I knew I needed to check the gum line areas for decay problems because they were most likely going to have gum line cavities. So there were a ton of things that was showing me, but I ended up using the microscope and then asking the office, can we please implement some more salivary testing so we actually know what we're looking at? I started with a different company, got frustrated because I was using multiple tests because I knew I needed to test. If I had someone with cavity issues, I needed to do the caries test and I needed to do the fungi test. And if I had perio, well, Candida can drive inflammation too. So I needed to do the perio test and I needed to do the, so it was just like a combination. So I luckily found Bristle, started implementing that, fell in love with the entire company. And shortly after starting to use it and implement it into practice, I don't remember if it was you, Danny, or Brian, or Shiv, that I was like, hey, I want on board. Like, I love the science. This is totally up my alley. I want to help people at the root cause. And I want to learn more about the oral microbiome because really, there's no education out for any hygienist to understand exactly how to approach and shift and change the oral microbiome. We've been taught our entire life to mechanically remove, and we got to kill everything. Well, I think the special thing about Bristle is we really focus on growing the good, and not wiping out the entire oral microbiome. And we are walking organisms of bacteria. So I think having all of the categories that we offer as far as halitosis issues and gut inflammation, susceptibility, and gum inflammation. And then I learned also that some of my patients I was testing for cavity issues might be really high on inflammatory bacteria, and they never showed it symptomatically. But as Danny said, we know these bacteria tied to the systemic connection with Alzheimer's disease. Bacteria gets into the bloodstream and can cause cardiovascular issues. Diabetes patients have a harder time with insulin control when we have certain microbes within the bloodstream. So it was the whole picture for me, and I was really, really excited to be a part of the team. And I love coaching so that we can kind of get to the root cause of everybody's issue and tease out what we need to change and create homeostasis.
I know. Well, first of all, thank you for that. And I got excited because you went into the personalization part and teasing things out. And, I personally always love to put a good puzzle together. while I'm doing it in other areas of the company, I would say, to you, question for you really, in terms of the folks that you were seeing in clinic, particularly in your last role at the biologic dental office, and the folks that you're seeing coming to Bristle, similarities, what problems are you seeing with people, and what are people needing help and support in terms of getting to that root cause?
So I would say we have like a couple different niches of people who are coming to the testing process. One of our biggest, um, you know, clients that we're seeing are halitosis issues, which was super eye-opening to me because honestly, in 20 years of practice, I might have mentioned halitosis to my patients here or there when I noticed it, but
Mhm.
I never really had a whole lot of patients sharing that with me as a
Yeah.
clinician. And now most of the calls that I have are usually people who are struggling and have had a huge journey of like tonsil removal. They've been exploring the gut and, doing all kinds of things um, that they've spent a ton of money on, and they're just searching for the reasons why. So that's been a little bit different and eye-opening and kind of heartbreaking, listening to some of the stories of those who are affected just
Mhm.
emotionally, and their jobs are affected, their relationships are affected, and working through those challenges have been. And then we have the people who are looking for the core answer. Either they've had some gut issues, or maybe they've had long time perio, which was one of my frustrations. Like, let's get to the root cause of why
Yeah.
we're having bone loss, and everything that we're doing surgically or physically for scaling and root planing, and they're in that cycle, like getting to the understanding of why they're still struggling with that, even though they're doing everything right. So I would say, and then you have your cavity, people,
Yeah.
occasionally that are coming in. I have a lot of parents who might have kids that have cavities and they're looking for those answers. That's been super fun because earlier we detect things, we're able to be the most preventative. I've learned through testing when I think everybody would benefit. Like, I just think for me, like, what is truly preventative dentistry? It's understanding what's going on in the body.
Right.
Airway, gut health is tied to what's going on. Airway and how you breathe, sleep and sleep apnea affects your oral microbiome. So really, it's just trying to put the puzzle pieces together for everybody that way. But we have the gamut, biohackers, people who really are just into fitness, and people who are preventative, those who have been dealing with systemic diseases like maybe Alzheimer's disease, or they're dealing with gut dysbiosis and SIBO issues.
Hmm.
So really, those who have just gone on this holistic journey of health, and are working through some investigative work, and are starting in the gut and the oral microbiome because of the connections.
Awesome. I know it's safe to say, and I think I wanted to make this a very strong call out, so feel free to back me up or add anything else that you would before we jump into the report that you have to share with us. I know, as you mentioned, like Bristle cannot do a cleaning, we cannot do a physical assessment, right? But it's another layer,
Mhm.
particularly if you're struggling with a co-occurrence of another issue. I know we've definitely seen folks who have had salivary cancer or have had very specific things happen and need to treat their mouth in a different way as they, kind of come back from that disease. And so I just wanted to kind of set the record straight. By no means are we saying don't go see your dentist, right? Like, clearly Heather would be the first person to advocate, please, your dentist is your partner. We have many dental offices using Bristle in office now, as well as Heather was with her patients. But I think it's, it's another tool in your toolkit, especially when you're struggling for answers or you're trying to figure out, like you said, the puzzle. And we're hoping that we can both educate, right, and offer something that for many people is not locally available in their area, and be kind of that guide or that navigator to support you as you're putting maybe the pieces together when you might have hit a dead end or you feel frustrated, etc. So Heather, I know you have a report pulled up, and it is from one of our team members. And oh, did you want to show the bacteria though first?
Yeah,
or
I have them on the same screen. So
okay,
we'll
perfect. I
we'll do
didn't
this.
want to overdrive there. So yeah, I think that would be interesting as
So this is the fun part. And I use my slides all the time in my coaching calls, because for me, like, it's important for you to understand the niches, right? Of the mouth. Like, there's certain things like brushing and flossing that are beneficial. And then I'm a true believer in water flossing. So I love sharing this here because this is a live slide. So when we look at your the test results, I'll kind of share, like, I'm just gonna pause for a second. Like, there's spinning rods, there's spirochetes. Spirochetes are the little corkscrew swimming guys. These guys live in the pocket area. And then we have the chained rods and chained cocci. This is a red blood cell here. But this is a severe dysbiosis and an advanced perio patient. And you can see the crazy busy bacteria that are in there. The benefits of your brushing and flossing is you're helping to disrupt that sticky biofilm. Like, it's all about removing the areas that can cause dysbiosis and anaerobic environments for these bacteria that cause inflammation. And whenever we see these red blood cells or white blood cells, we know that the patient is inflamed. But like I said, what am I looking at? So early in the testing process for a little while, I'm going to share. Just let me know if this, are you seeing my test results now? Okay, awesome. So
Heather, do you want to set it up? I guess this exact oral health report card, and this is exactly what the results look like. You're looking at it, I believe, from the way the patient or the test taker would see it, right?
Yes.
So kind of give us an overview, and I think this is such an interesting set of results because on a quick glance, it may not appear that anything is glaringly wrong. So yeah.
So I like to usually start out just saying, the basic drive through the platform, I think, is important for everybody to understand. We have a general overview. You can go into detailed results on this upper bar. We always have a care plan. I love doing the coaching calls just to make sure that you're understanding the theory and the process of Bristol's treatment process, because we do have a little bit different philosophy when it comes to approaching the oral microbiome. We do have a new feature. It's a compare feature. So if you have multiple tests, you can go through that. This is a newer development that we're working on. And then raw results. Raw results, I will definitely get into in a little bit, because I use that one quite a bit with my patients just to tease out a little bit more information.
It's the nerdy part. Yeah, for sure.
So, and it's needed. Sometimes we get results that aren't necessarily like they're not yelling at me. So, sometimes you get a test and you're like, I have halitosis issues and my halitosis score says I'm at 1.3. Why? Well, because in the general scheme of things, you might not have a huge, but when we open it up, like, let's just open up this halitosis score, for instance. When we open it up, you're going to have different bacteria right here involved with that score. And you get a percentage, a score based on the general population. So if you're at a 1.5 or you're at 6.6 score, then you're going to, dig into these bacteria and kind of look. Just because you have a high score doesn't mean you have halitosis. Just because you have a low score, it doesn't mean. It really boils down to how that bacteria is reacting in your body. And I'm learning too, like this Graniacentella allicans, he's a strong player in people's halitosis issues. So when I see this one at the top, this is one that I can empathize. I probably this person probably is suffering from significant halitosis issues, because this seems to be a common occurrence for those patients. And this one's at a 9. So a little bit about how this is laid out. We'll just kind of go through. This is, now we've moved into like the detailed results. So you can always scroll through. It gives you all of the information on every category in each of the categories. So starting with the first bit overview here, I'm just going to go back to overview. So we have a number of health related bacteria category, and then condition related. So health related commensal bacteria are super important. They are like our companion plants in our garden. They help correct the ones that are problematic. Nitrate reducing bacteria is super important. Most of the bacteria that are nitrate reducing usually live on the back of the tongue. They're usually an anaerobic bacteria, which means they like oxygen. So sometimes these two scores will be correlated, because some of the bacteria, like Granicenella adicans, lives on the tongue, and it's an anaerobic bacteria. So it creates a biofilm and then blocks out the tongue, nitrate reducing bacteria, and then snuffs them out. So that's the relationships that we
Heather,
kind of
and bring us back to biology or science class or chemistry. Anaerobic bacteria, is one more difficult to attack than another, or to deal with, I guess, in the mouth? Or do you see more of one type than another?
So in general, so what anaerobic means is it's a bacteria that lives in an environment where there's no oxygen. So it's going to live within a biofilm, whether that's on your tongue, in your tonsils, or it's in between the crevices of your teeth, right? Either in the tissue, or I call, if you're not flossing, you're not cleaning the armpits. Those are, anaerobic environments. They're somewhat hard. I think sometimes, the gram negative, gram positive is a little bit trickier. But anaerobic, I like to use oxygenating type of processes when it comes to dealing with anaerobic bacteria. Most of the problematic bacteria in the mouth tend to be anaerobic. So that's why one of the processes that we use is, or one of the care plan items that we use with pretty good success is Hosis, because it's an oxygenating rinse. So anaerobic, it means it's living in an environment where there's no oxygen. So when we're brushing and we're flossing, or using a water pick, we're incorporating oxygen into the pocket or into that area and helping to mitigate or weed out those anaerobic bacteria. And then we have a really cool category in this last section that tells you a little bit about probiotics. And we are strong on the belief that probiotics help to counteract and correct the oral microbiome in certain ways as kind of a bactericidin. Like for instance, Lactobacillus rudii seems to be a pretty important beneficial bacteria in here, but Lactobacillus rudii needs to be taken in an oral probiotic. It's not a natural colonizer in the mouth. So we do need to incorporate that and plant it into the garden as a companion plant, and it helps to reduce bleeding and inflammation, but it also mitigates some of the Porphyromonas and Fusobacterium, bacteria that can be pro-inflammatory and pro-halitosis issues on that scale. So, and then we have facultative. Facultative are probably the harder ones, I think, to deal with. Facultative can live in either environment. And then, like I said, there's some of the beneficial bacteria. If we go down into the commensals, most of the commensal beneficial bacteria tend to be facultative or aerobic in nature. So like I said, we tend to try to find products that are more targeting and not, obliterating everything. As an oral health coach, I see how detrimental using constant antimicrobials in the mouth can actually create more of a dysbiosis than you realize. So we try to carefully pick, and honestly, during coaching sessions, I can cater to, if someone's more holistic, or someone doesn't like, the Smart Mouth CPC rinse because it's a strong, chemically type, it works effectively against Granny Centella Addicans. But I can kind of tweak and pull my holistic background to kind of figure out, maybe you're better off with oil pulling with ozone, or, using some sort of essential oil based products that are more targeting to specific bacteria. So, so this is the main kind of, and everything on our platform opens up for education. So I do want to kind of just share, every bacteria can open, and it describes how it's connected to the mouth, where it kind of lives in colonies. All of these little things open up and kind of explain about the benefits of the probiotics. And then you can close it all up. So everything we have on our platform is pretty dynamic. So let's go to the results here. This result, there's definitely, I usually start here and then ask like what the main, concern is for the patient, so that I make sure I'm addressing, what their chief concern is. Sorry, my computer is a little slow on going.
We're all on video as well. Yeah, I know that will happen.
So it's thinking hard. Sorry, guys.
It's okay. Heather, is it ever a moment where someone comes and like you said, you're doing a check-in with them, right? So if this person got their results back, and I think gum inflammation was also high on this report, and maybe they aren't having any signs of bleeding or whatnot. I mean, how common is that where people, get a score that maybe is not indicative of their current reality?
I'm going to say it's a 50-50. Like I think some people are pretty surprised. Like I don't have gingivitis. I don't have perio. Why are my scores this way? Sorry, the computer system is killing me here. Let's see.
Try that drop down.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, I think I have the results under.
Awesome. Perfect. All right, here we go. And then overview. There we go. So yeah, you can absolutely have, a high score of gum inflammation and not be symptomatic with that. But you want to make sure that you're taking care of, the bacteria here. Because for instance, Fusobacterium is tied to colorectal cancer if it gets down into, the lower intestine. It's also tied to a lot of other GI disorders. So, maybe it's not a concern of the patient, but I do try to, make sure that they're aware. I try in the coaching calls to address what the patient's concern is. So if they're worried about halitosis, even if their score is low, I try to cater to that aspect of it. Now, I know that some of the products that I'm using for halitosis should mitigate some of the ones that are also in that other. And then through the care plan process, we're going to actually mitigate, the other categories as well. But we do have some bacteria that might be susceptible more to certain products and rinses. So then they usually need to come back and test so that we can see what grew in the garden as we weeded, and then readjust and figure out, okay, so now, we took care of some of the halitosis causing ones, but something else might have grown, and now we need to switch you to this rinse and figure out how to mitigate that one and support the oral microbiome.
Yeah, I think what you're pointing to, and I know that you and I have talked about this just in our side conversations at work, et cetera. I mean, I've spent the last year going through gut stuff, and that wasn't a one and done situation, right? That was working with a functional doctor and a nutritionist. And it wasn't like, here, Dawn, here's a pill, right? And you're on your merry way. And I'm happy to say that all that's resolved. But I think what you're pointing to is that in this personalization, we're continuing to personalize throughout the process.
And
right?
it takes
And
time.
so it takes time, right? Like you didn't get here overnight. And so particularly with signs of inflammation, for instance, whether or not you're seeing bleeding, you're seeing that pink in the sink, you're experiencing puffy swollen gums, systemic indication or systemic inflammation anywhere, or an indicator of that. I know oftentimes the first sign of systemic inflammation is in the mouth, even before the gut. So yeah, it's definitely a warning signal for sure.
Leaky gut, leaky gums.
Yeah.
It's real.
Yes.
Yep. Yep. So, so that's kind of a general overview of that. And then we have our care plan information.
And this is where you get really personalized, right? Like I know we definitely, as we're sending this out, this is as bespoke as possible based on bacteria and kind of the algorithm in the background doing its work. But I think this is where you take it a step further.
Well, and I think that's the important part of coaching, because sometimes maybe the computer picked, what it thought was the problem and then assigned you the care plan. But then I have the ability to, switch it up to make sure that we're taking care of the issue. Or, if you don't like some of the products, which, we have a lot of holistic people in our clientele that don't want to use like the Smart Mouth, and maybe they want a biocidin or, ozone, or they don't like the supplements that we're using. Maybe I can find some supplements. I email a lot of people after my coaching calls just as a follow-up, like these might be, some of the products that we talked about that weren't on the platform that might be catered to what they're wanting. So the coaching gives a lot more specific ability to cater to that person's wants and needs, really. And honestly, like sometimes teasing out, like, do you have sleep apnea?
Right.
Do we need to go get a sleep study?
Does
Because
your partner say that you snore, right? Maybe you don't even know, right? Or whatnot.
and coming back to the candida, sometimes candida can be an airway issue, and cavities are an airway issue. So sometimes we might have really low cavity detecting decay problems. And then as an oral health coach, I'm like, it might not be a bacterial issue. Maybe it's airway or gut. SIBO gut issues are going to have transport for nutrient problems. So we know that SIBO patients are going to have a vitamin D deficient. Vitamin D carries calcium. K2 lays it into the structures. So that's part of your perio and your remineralization process. So even though you might not see the bacteria on the slide, it gives me hints to like, where do we need to point you with your practitioner? Do you need to see a myofunctional therapist? Where do we need to go to fix the core cause of what's causing the issue? Whether it's perio or decay, or your halitosis. Is it postnasal drip? Is it gut issues? There's all kinds. It's all connected. Yeah. So with this platform, we have like the two phases of your care process. So phase one, we are very big into like a short-term antimicrobial process. So week 1 and 2 are going to be our weeding process. That's where we're tilling the garden and we're, trying to work on the antimicrobial part. So we usually have you using a nano hydroxyapatite toothpaste. Boca is the one that we usually recommend. That one has great remineralization processes. Nano hydroxyapatite, your tooth is made out of calcium hydroxyapatite structure, so it makes sense to put that into the mouth for remineralization. It remineralizes at a more alkaline phase than fluoride, so you don't have to be in a more acid phase in order for mineralization to take place. Flossing and water flossing. I always say water flossing is a must in my coaching calls because of the slides. And then I always try to get, the devices out and, show you, how are you angling it? What are you doing? Are you angling your toothbrush correct? And, those types of things during your coaching call. Are you using a tongue scraper? And then the rinse, usually we have some sort of rinse that is involved for that phase 1. And during phase 1, we usually, if there's an antimicrobial, we're not going to be incorporating our probiotics. They're not going to take hold. you're working,
Get
and
rid of the bad
especially,
guys first,
yeah,
right? Before we kind of repopulate with the good guys. Yeah.
yep. So it's tilling the garden. But during that process, we can add nitrogen to the soil, right? So that's where we have our nitrate, arginine, and xylitol dietary supplements. Now, food is everything. What you put in your mouth makes a difference when it comes to diet. A lot of things that I do touch base on is how much sugar intake are you doing? Are you eating a lot of processed foods? You really should be on a whole food diet, because that's really going to be the best in feeding the oral microbiome in a healthy aspect. What kind of water are you drinking? That's another thing that I talk about. Like, if you're drinking RO water because you don't want the fluoride and all of the stuff in, you need to add trace minerals. If you're drinking bottled water and it's filtered, you might not have minerals in it. Minerals are important for the oral microbiome because that's the remineralization and the pH balance part and the hydration part. Like, if you're dehydrated and you're just drinking, I call it dead water, it can't cross the cell border. So you have to have trace minerals. This is a great product here, sparkling mineral water. Or just adding Celtic salt to your bottle or of water, a glass of water, can help better remineralization and make sure your saliva has enough minerals in it to do what it's supposed to do. Your saliva is the base of your digestion process. It's the base of bringing your pH level up after you've eaten. So that's super important. So that's the soil. Like, your saliva is your soil. Having nitrate, arginine, xylitol helps with increasing those beneficial bacteria in the nitrate. So nitrate reduces to nitric oxide. Nitric oxide's a vasodilator, super
It's been
important
huge,
for heart
right?
health.
It's all over, right? For cardiac support,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yep.
etc.
All kind, yeah. And it starts in the mouth. Like, the bacteria in the mouth start that nitric oxide process, and then it finishes in the stomach. So we need the healthy bacteria on that tongue to start that process for vascular health. A lot of the products on the market, there's a few big ones that will completely wipe out the nitrate reducing bacteria. There's now studies showing that when that happens, you're at higher risk for blood pressure issues. So we absolutely need to make sure that we're keeping our nitrate reducing bacteria high so that we have better heart health. And that's going to result in having lower bacteria that can also cause heart conditions, right? So
I know nitric oxide, I know as an athlete, that's just a huge component in the athlete community, particularly if you are running hard, working out hard, you're going to probably be mouth breathing at some point, no matter what you do. So I think, both oral health and then this consideration as a supplement is very interesting. Yeah.
that, and if you're mouth breathing and not nasal breathing, then you're going to have lower nitrates. So if I see lower nitrates and we have a lot of tongue coating bacteria that's causing halitosis, mouth taping at night might be a really good option. So those are, things that we can kind of tease out by the test. Arginine helps with pH balance and helps mitigate, some halitosis issues, and helps to support streptococcus strands that are beneficial. Xylitol, I love xylitol, but these are all nitrogen for the soil. It's changing the terrain of the mouth so that then when we are working on planting our garden with the probiotics, we have a good sound foundation for those to kind of take hold. So that comes back to our second phase in our care plans. Usually we're going to stick on the hydroxyapatite. Always my order is brush, floss, tongue scrape, use a water flosser. And then after the second week, we drop the mouthwash and then add in our oral probiotics. Oftentimes we have a number of different beneficial bacteria. We have 5 different strands plus xylitol. Each strand we've done a lot of research on how it mitigates, certain pathology. That's all in the platform under that bactericidin information. So we add in the commensal bacteria and help to increase that. Of course, diet again, like increasing fermented foods, making sure we're eating like leafy greens, and beets are helpful. Arginine you can find in meat, chicken, fish, nuts, those types of things. So diet is everything. So yeah, that kind of like sums up basically what I try to go over with the care plan. The compare part, I don't know if I won't go through that just because it gets a little bit complicated. Maybe we'll have a whole thing
Yeah, we
on
can,
the
maybe that would be
comparing.
good, when to test, when to retest, we can think about that. I want to definitely, I think, first of all, the one thing that we know, there's just a ton of information in the report, right?
It's
And I think
overwhelming. Yeah.
just like if we went to get blood work, right, which, I've drawn regularly, I'm starting to learn what some things mean and what I should be looking out for, but it's always reviewed by my doctor or some type of practitioner as well, and they're my partner in that journey. I see, the huge benefit to having someone, even being part of the organization, having somebody walk through a report with you. It's just a whole different level of both access, ability to make it personalized, and really hopefully most effective to fit in with your lifestyle and what you're dealing with. So
Yeah.
I guess, at this point, is there anything else, Danny or Heather, that you would add specifically about the results or the care plans themselves? Otherwise, I think looking at time, we should open it up for questions, kind of let the community ask, or anything that they have on their mind. I have just a few notes in the chat here, but happy to have everybody just come off mute and also ask their questions as well. Oh, as I'm coming. Some are in the Q&A and some are in the chat. Both are fine. So just bear with me as a human as I look at them both. So this question, Heather and Danny, do you have any thoughts or experience with Perio Protect? I know this has been coming up a lot, guys. Evidently, it involves trays with a peroxide solution that you use daily to reduce the cleaning solution, or sorry, to introduce the cleaning solution into the pockets that brushing alone can't reach.
I have seen really good results so far. I know that we have a few hygienists who are using it. And once again, it's going back to that anaerobic aerobic situation. The main solution that they're using in the Perio Protect trays is a hydrogen peroxide based solution. So it's safe. It doesn't wipe out the bad bacteria, or the good bacteria, excuse me. So it's not mitigating the commensal healthy bacteria as much, because it is oxygenating in nature. And so I do see great results, and I think it's a benefit. Absolutely. I don't know if you need to use it for life, but as a hygienist, I do think that, the oral microbiome changes so frequently.
Right.
We're going through stress through the holiday, and that can affect your oral microbiome. We're going through the sweets process with, all the holiday cookies and the pies and all of that can affect your oral microbiome. If you go on an antibiotic, instant shift. It's a automatic dysbiosis. A test should be done, and maybe the Perio Protect trays are the right thing to do to kind of give you a boost. I've used ozone trays, kind of similar in fashion to the Perio Protect trays, so I do think it's definitely a benefit.
Another question here, is there a biofilm buster you would recommend? What are the most common beneficial bacteria you find in a healthy oral microbiome? I think to the first question, Heather, feel free, jump in, but I think, biofilm buster, we'd have to define what is the biofilm made up of first. What are we trying to bust? And then to the second point of this question, right, what are your commensals looking like? So yeah, I guess what are the most common beneficial bacteria?
Whoever asked that, can you just like pop off mute and just kind of clarify?
Oh yeah. That question was from Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, do you want to ask?
May not be in a place where they can come off mute.
Okay.
Too.
All right. Well, let's see. Biofilm Buster. I guess I'll take a swing. Maybe, I'm not sure. So I'm very familiar with like products like Denticidin. products, which I would consider probably a Biofilm Buster.
Mhm.
It's more of a holistic herbal remedy that definitely works on the oral, biofilm. I think of Biofilm Buster as oil pulling too, because oil pulling is a lipid process of pulling oil, and it's going to pull and bust up the biofilm that way. So I do think that there's applications for it. I believe in oil pulling fully. I've seen great results on my slides. As I'm hoping that I'm answering that question.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
doesn't seem like oil pulling. Honestly, dental Sidon, I've had a few people on, and it doesn't seem to affect the beneficial bacteria as much either, which is why sometimes I do recommend it in my patients or clients who are looking for a more holistic approach. So I'm hoping I'm answering that question. Did that answer your
yeah,
question?
I mean, I think it's also like, again, it's a little bit of like what you're doing and what you're suggesting is definitely educating on generalized products that fit into
Yeah.
that category. But also the point is like, that's, it is
Yeah.
still
So,
generalized versus what is
right.
needed, what else is going on in your mouth besides biofilm, right?
Right. Yeah. And like on the oil pulling side of it, how does oil pulling bust up the
Okay.
biofilm? Like it's a lipid and lipid bilayer in the biofilm that's causing that coating. So when you're pulling, the lipid saponification process helps to break up the lipid bilayer so that then that you can access. So usually oil pulling would be a pre-rinse because you're helping to address the biofilm before you're actually brushing, flossing,
Before you're
counseling.
getting into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, the big question, guys, we hear it all the time. So, Danny, Heather, what's the real answer? Is hydrogen peroxide too acidic for frequent use? This person says, I know the benefit for the gums, but can it actually cause cavities? Who wants to take that one?
I defer to Heather.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Heather, it's you.
So I love hydrogen peroxide. I usually don't recommend it at full dose. I actually had a call a couple weeks ago. Someone's been using it every single day for the last 2 years, and his oral microbiome looked beautiful. So I have been recommending it at 1 part hydrogen peroxide, 3 parts water, just 3% hydrogen peroxide. It's pretty watered down. But the benefits are it's oxygenating. I use it in the water flossers. Too, to get more oxygen to below the gum line area, especially in perio patients, especially with those spirochetes. The best way that I can incorporate something to get spirochetes, because they're tricky buggers to get rid of, are using hydrogen peroxide. I haven't seen too much on the acid level of it. I know there's some questions on the oxygenation part, but honestly, bacteria use peroxide in part of their antimicrobial processes against each other. So it's actually a natural process within the body.
Cool. Okay, here's another big one. This might be another controversial question. Candida. So if Candida appears on an exam, is it normal at low levels? Should it never appear? If it appears, how does one make it disappear? Again, there's a lot going on in that question, but Heather, best you can.
So Candida is, I would say it's probably a commensal in the fact that I see it almost on every single test result, usually at low levels. I get concerned when it's probably, honestly, you have to go by symptoms with people with sometimes with this, but if it's high, absolutely we have issues. I learned that on my slides. If I could see it on the slides at my office, we were having decay problems pretty significantly. And honestly, those usually were perio patients because they were root decay with recession. So it drives inflammation, it drives cavity issues. So it's problematic when it's in dysbiosis. It's a naturally occurring bacteria. We get it from a lot of different things. At low levels, it's usually pretty innate. But when we have it in higher numbers, and I usually tease that out in my coaching calls. If I'm seeing Candida and they're talking about, you know, some issues, I also want to say this, like Candida in the mouth, Candida in the gut. If it's high here, you probably have CFO issues. So I try to incorporate, and this is where the specialization comes from. I've worked with a naturopath before. Sometimes if I see it super high, I might incorporate a systemic process like a biocidin and detox, or maybe colloidal silver and aloe to help with the gut dysbiosis, because no matter what, if I'm just treating one end of the tube, it's just going to recolonize.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that thought process of one end of the tube too. That's a good visual, literally within the body as well. So,
the head is attached.
it is, it's attached.
Somehow it got removed from the body, and we need to put it back to the whole body, because everything starts here and it's all connected. Any other questions?
Yeah, let's talk. We'll take two more, and then I will end with a few announcements, and obviously thank to everyone to being here. We will be sending out the replay as well. Is there a healthy or better formulated fluoride toothpaste without all the extra ingredients for those who might and still want to use fluoride? I know fluoride is somewhat controversial on the alternative dentistry side. And yeah, I mean, I'll say a few words on fluoride. I know we have thoughts, but I mean, fluoride is your choice, right? Like every product you put in your body is still your choice, right? That's really our belief as well. We can tell you what happens in terms of the chemistry of things or the biochemistry within the mouth, particularly as Heather was alluding to with some of the mainstream, particularly mouthwashes that destroy everything. I know that there's nanohydroxyapatite toothpaste that also contain fluoride, but I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, and I think Tom's of Maine sensitive has arginine in it too. That one might have fluoride in it too. So there are studies that when you combine arginine and fluoride together, there's an oral microbiome benefit. So there are definitely places where fluoride is appropriate. I think, yeah. So I would see I think Tom's of Maine is in our care plan now because of the arginine. I think that one has fluoride in it. So, and we use CTX4 rinse too, that also has fluoride in it as well. So we do still use some products that do have fluoride, and we have recognized that there are some research out there that fluoride can have a benefit. As you know, and I was on the fluoride camp for 15-20 years until I did a little bit more research, and I've been kind of on the hydroxyapatite side of things for probably four or 5 years now, that way. But yeah, I think it's everybody's choice on how to and we make options for everybody. Like there's a lot of clients that use fluoride. I don't tell someone to come off fluoride, because that's ultimately that's their decision. Yeah.
Totally.
But Tom's of Maine, sensitive, has arginine and fluoride, and there's some research with the two of those being a good supporter of the oral microbiome.
Okay, here's a question that I'm just gonna I'm gonna meld it a little bit to make sure that it makes sense for everybody. But I will say this to the person that asked this question. This is one of the #1 searched things that comes up at Bristle in terms of our blog posts and information. And the question is, as I reword it just slightly, is if you are experiencing periodontitis and thinking about your sex life and potentially oral sex, could there be more damage done? What is the connection? And I think, for everyone on the call, one of the biggest thing that is searched and comes up on the site is, can you get a yeast infection from oral sex? And the answer is yes. It is, can you get so anyhow, yes.
And in general, I'm just gonna prereq on that. Like, if you're sharing intimately with anybody, you're sharing your microbiome. So if you're
kissing your kids,
anyone,
right?
And swapping spits, you're also sharing all the periopathology, the halitosis pathology. So I always say, like, if you're struggling with like halitosis or perio issues, you're probably going to have better luck treating your partner at the same time, because you're constantly influxing yourself in that process if you have a healthy relationship.
Right. So I think we tried to tackle as many questions as I could get to this evening.
And
We will be
Joe,
sending out the
Joe
replay.
said that the Tom's of Maine does not have arginine. So right now I don't have a good option.
Okay. Okay. We can look into that. We can probably do a blog post or a social media post as well
For a
on that.
fluoride toothpaste. Yeah.
And in terms of, what's going to work for you, right? Obviously we're here, we're going to say, as we saw, everyone's results are different. Being able to test to understand what's really happening in your mouth is really important. As a thank you for joining us tonight, I'm going to announce two things. One, I'm going to share with you a code that you can use on bristle testing or probiotics. The code, I'm going to type it in the chat, is tonight 10. It's for 10% off. So tonight, because you were here tonight, tonight 10 is the code. And additionally, we really see the importance of coaching alongside the test and are going to be making it very easy to buy the two of them together very soon. I do have a link. The code does work for that link as well. This is not public to anyone yet. It is in the chat, but you are welcome to click into the chat if you're interested in purchasing the, a little bit of savings you get from buying the coaching and the testing together to get started. And you may even have Heather as your coach. So thank you to everybody for being here. Again, tonight 10 is your free gift for the evening. And if you're interested in doing both testing and coaching, the link is in the chat. If there's anything else as we sign off, feel free to put it in the chat. Not, we hope to see you all online. Join us on social media, send us messages. We try to do our best to answer as swiftly as possible. Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you guys. Yes,
All
Ren,
right.
you're welcome.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.